I keep talking about this as silly goose development. There is incredible value in AI tools if it helps you bring back whimsy in development and reminds you of why you fell in love with developing in the first place. Getting back to the whimsy of it all is really lovely.
What a great mindset. I like that mantra. Bring back the whimsy. Welcome, everybody, to the AWS Humans in the Loop podcast. I'm your host, Chris Shea. I'm a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. Today, I'm joined by Brooke Jamieson, a senior developer advocate at AWS.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me back also. I wasn't sure if I would get invited back after last time, but we're here.
Oh, of course. You were our inaugural guest in the first round of episodes, and it's fantastic to have you back on the show.
Yeah.
About a year ago, almost down to the day, right?
Yeah, it's been a big year.
So a lot has changed already, and it's only 3 months into the year. So Brooke, for the uninitiated, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Brooke and I'm annoying on the internet. No, but I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS. It's a weird job title. Like, it sounds like a fake job, but it's a very real job. Essentially, AWS wants to make products for developers, and developers want to make sure they're building the right way with AWS. But the two groups are really not good at talking with each other. That's been proven over time. So there's a whole team of us as developer advocates that act in the middle. So you'll see us, like, we speak at big keynotes. You'll see us making video content. You'll see us writing blogs. Follow me on my new Medium. But across all of that, we also do a bunch behind the scenes with improving products before launch, giving lots of feedback. Sometimes welcome, sometimes not so much, from different teams. We're very opinionated, and we're really just fighting for what the customer wants us to be making. And we're making sure that all the signals we get from our audiences make it through to the right channels internally. Like, I get comments and messages after I post a video demo about something and someone asking for new features, and I can quickly send them through to the right VP who will have a team to action them. So that part is really nice. It's like definitely an in-between sort of two worlds role, but it's a really fun job and exciting. Yeah.
And you play a super important role for customers, being able to advocate on their behalf like that.
Yeah, I love it because, like, I was a customer before I worked here. I think most DAs were, and I knew how hard it was to try and fight for some of these things before. So now it is my utmost joy to be able to fix things for people or make it easier.
Fantastic. Last time we talked was a little over a year ago today.
Yeah.
A lot has changed in the AI space since then, right?
I think a lot has changed since last week, probably. So last year just seems like time is elastic at this point.
It's outrageous. I used to say, like, things move in dog years. Now it's definitely a different animal.
Yeah, but which animal though? This is something, like, it's got to be something a bit mythical, something with a lot of limbs, I guess, would be AI if it had some extra fingers, maybe.
I think like a, maybe like a drop bear.
Yeah,
I think
I'll
it's some
take it.
drop bear years.
Yeah.
But what would you say has been one of the biggest changes that you've noticed in AI in the last year?
I didn't even know how to answer that, but I think the way that we're working has changed so much. Even the way we look at productivity has changed, and the velocity of launches is wild, like, across all of the products in this space. And as someone who makes a lot of launch content, it is truly terrifying to live during this time. But even, a year ago, we didn't have Kiro, right? Kiro launched on July 14, which I will remember because it launched during my literal actual wedding ceremony. And it's been a long time, and it's still not even a full year yet. So, like, what's it going to look like in a year from now? Truly no idea.
Yeah, I can imagine that's an interesting ceremony. You know, you get like your watch blown up, you're like, my people need me.
That literally, it's so embarrassing. There are photos of me in my actual wedding ceremony, like, reposting the Kiro launch video I made, because I needed to know the launch had actually happened. So, like, inside baseball is you're never 100% sure if something's going to launch because, like, obviously a lot of things can happen. And I just wanted to know it actually had launched so I could stop thinking about work. So there's a photo of me, like, at my actual wedding trying to find if my launch post had gone up to repost it just so I could finally relax, which is, probably I should be on a watch list for that. But
Well, hey, I respect the commitment, if nothing else.
yeah.
But no, I think what we've seen that's really interesting too is in the early days of AI coding companion tooling, it was very prompt based, almost transactional. It was like a Q&A chatbot, or you'd leave a comment in your code base.
Yeah.
There was a pretty short and sweet way to interact with it. What we're seeing now, I think, is a completely different beast where
Yeah,
you can have an LLM one-shot an entire application.
for sure.
You don't even need to have an IDE open. You don't even need to write a single line of code.
Yeah.
How's that changing your day-to-day?
Well, I think even if you go back to, like, I used to make prompt engineering tutorials. You don't even need prompt engineering tutorials anymore because even, you used to be able to maybe one-shot something if you were really good at prompt engineering and you could, like, speak the AI's language. Now it's so much more about the person using it. You're not trying to like prompt engineer for the specific model as much. Obviously you are in like some cases, but when people day to day are using a lot of these tools, they're not thinking about prompt engineering anymore because the tools are really taking on that form. So it's more about like, how do you want to work and how can the tool conform to that rather than trying to conform your work style to the way the tool wants to talk with you.
It's a really interesting trend. We're not even seeing a point where we need to learn how to interact with an AI system. It's learning how to interact with imperfect prompts.
A
Which is
100%, because it's like just assuming that the machines are going to take on this work now, right? Like it used to be so much extra overhead on the human to say, how are we going to Tetris all of this together? How can I really optimize to get the right output from my input? But now it's just like throw it in and see what happens. And it's probably fine, which is really interesting.
Yeah, like the ability for AI to fill in the blanks now when you have an application that you want to build, even with a fairly limited, I'd argue, primitive prompt, is very impressive now.
Yeah.
Now,
But I think like when people are getting frustrated with that though, is like AI systems are really polite and they're trying to be everything to everyone, which kind of leaves you with like lukewarm water. It's like in the middle for people. So I think what we're seeing now a lot is like people really want their systems to be opinionated. The best engineers I know are incredibly opinionated. That's what makes them an incredible engineer. So now it's about like, if I am just going to throw these short prompts or like messages into my system, without doing prompt engineering, how can I make sure that my AI agents are as opinionated as I am when I need them to be? Like the notion of being a developer is all about making trade-offs. So all of your systems are making these trade-offs, but how can you make sure that your system is going to make the same side on that trade-off that you would?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any guidance on how to get an opinionated response out of an LLM?
Yeah, I think first step is going to talk to your most opinionated friends and like really getting in the mindset. Like Corey Quinn is one of my friends, and I think about how can I make my machine as like not necessarily making the same choices Corey would make, but it's just like really pushing how opinionated I can make it. And so with Kiro especially, it used to do that with steering files, or you can still use steering files, but they would. The way I would explain it is like your code, your rules. So you can have it manual or automatic, but anytime it's generating an output, it can be steered in the direction you want. But now that's been taken to new levels with things called powers and skills, which people with use cold code would know what skills are. Powers are sort of the same. They just also incorporate MCPs into them. But now you can have all of these really nice workflows that are built around all of the opinionated ways you would want. And the biggest part of this for a lot of companies isn't a lack of opinions. It's that they haven't sat down and had these like big meaty conversations about like, okay, how do we want to build things? Are we going to prioritize like speed or latency or cost? Like, what are we going to do for these trade-offs? Because the answer to a lot of these questions is it depends. And any of those sort of like it depends questions, if you're not communicating those to your agent, it's not going to know about it to try and build in that way. So I think it's really interesting to see the human and like soft skills side of this really impacting the agentic development that's happening.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that you brought up Kiro Powers because I did want to highlight how much has changed with Kiro since it went GA back last July.
Yeah.
During your wedding. Congratulations again.
Chaos. Yeah, there's so much that's changed. So powers are sort of like a dynamic MCP tool loading system. So the problem is if you have a bunch of MCPs running in your system, it's just going to eat up all of your context window. And it's going to use so many tokens before you even get going. So powers are really good because they activate on demand with keywords in your conversation. So if you have something for like payments, maybe your Stripe power will load. Things that's really, instead of loading everything all the time, it's part of this like prompt engineering thing too, right? Like it's looking for the right tool to be able to help you. And this is where powers are great. So we have lots with partners, and then you just do one-click install, or you can make your own. There's a whole ecosystem of them. But Datadog, Figma, Stripe, Supabase, Neon, Netlify, Postman, Strands, SDK, all of that exists as powers, which is really nice.
I'm glad you bring up the Strands SDK as well. Could you tell me a little bit about what that is for the viewers at home?
Yeah, so Strands SDK is an open source framework from AWS that helps you to build agents in a way that you can actually steer and really use in production. It's so nice. I feel like it's one of the most slept on releases from AWS. I think because it was open source, it's really gone under the radar. But the developer experience around this is beautiful. You can do so much in such a few lines of code. I really recommend going on and looking at the examples. Even there's one like on the homepage that shows you in this, what's this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of code. And it's using Strand's agents to call the tool for like a weather thing to show you that. But it's like really neat and crisp developer experience. So you can focus on the code that you're writing, not figuring out all of the pipelines to make this happen.
That's awesome. And I think too, it can really help enable velocity across a developer team. And I think a great example of this too, like the value proposition that I've seen so far with coding assistant tools, again, to my point previously, right? Like it used to be a very interactive process where it
Yeah.
took a lot of, I think the technical term is finagling.
I think that is the technical term, yes.
Yeah, exactly. To get an LLM to produce an output that was close to what you wanted in an application.
Yeah.
Now I can one-shot a game on my phone from the metro without even having to touch a single line of code or open an IDE. How often are you seeing one-shot success right now with tools like Kiro and Claude Code?
I think, first of all, my favorite answer, which is it depends. I think once again, this comes down to how opinionated people are getting with it. Because if you're really like an experienced developer, I think you're not going to be happy with a one-shot output from any AI tool because it's not going to be as opinionated as you need. So I think in terms of a one-shot that you're actually happy with, if you have everything set up so that it's making those decisions in the way you want it to, that's what we're getting to with one-shot decisions now. Because like obviously, yeah, it can like throw up an app for something. But if it's going to be in the nuanced ways that you want, like things that developers find really impressive, from what I've seen in the community, almost always comes down to the customizations they've made so that it can be, so it can have the right personality while it's developing, not in terms of like it telling you pirate jokes or something, but in terms of it writing in the right languages with the right frameworks that you like, something that you can then work into what you're doing instead of just like making a bunch of guesses along the way and hoping for the best.
100%. That tracks with my experience too. It feels like folks, especially developers now, are taking on more of a PM role where they're developers now in LLM.
I mean, I think they were like that all the time. They just didn't have time to do it. Like, that's really the thing. Because, like, we've talked so much about developer productivity with lots of these AI tools. And maybe a year ago, the whole developer productivity thing was like, look how many lines of code it can crank out. But now what we're seeing with developer productivity is people, like, even if you think about handing over a project, it used to be so annoying. Like, you would have weeks of meetings of, like, if I'm a data scientist and I'm trying to hand over to a front-end engineer, just weeks of trying to figure out what each other are saying or like what you need from each other, being able to have your code repo open in Kiro and say, hey, I'm a data scientist. I'm handing over to my front end team. What do I need to tell them when I'm walking them through the code base? Or like, what do I need to get ready so I can hand this off easily? Or what do I need to make sure they understand about the technicalities of what I'm doing in a language that they can understand? Like that translation language as you hand off between humans, I have seen so much just on my own calendar of meetings that do not need to happen anymore just because I'm able to like cut to the chase in a really clear and concise way when I need to. So they have a much better experience when I'm handing over different projects and things. I'm seeing so much productivity increase from that outside of the code it's generating, which has been really interesting to see.
It's great to hear that you're using it not just in like a coding capacity too, but also just to generally make your life easier.
If there is a meeting I cannot go to, I will find a way to do that. Love that. So I think it's just, I don't know, AWS is a very shoot your shot sort of company. The cool thing about that is that everyone gets to see my content. The other side of that is that everyone sees my content and will ask me for stuff. So if I had coffee chats with everyone that needed to, I would not have time to do any of my actual job. So being able to make so many little internal tools that I can like, when I do have a coffee chat with someone, they're so much more informed about what's happening. It's like less of a guessing game and we can really cut to the chase. So it's that thing of cutting down a 3-meeting series to one. That's like a personal, cherished moment of mine just because anytime I see something being removed from my calendar, it's a joyous moment.
The dopamine hit is,
Truly. It's like closing all your tabs at the end of the day. I just love it.
yeah, no, I live for that thrill.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the day that you can invent a Brooke bot that can just go to the calls for you.
I don't think that would be good. I don't think HR would be ready for that. And I think, yeah, maybe there's definitely a lot of can versus should choices with AI. Like, can you do this? Sure. Should you? Maybe not so much. So maybe that's on the other side of the can versus should. But yeah, maybe 2027. You never know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So on the Kiro front,
Yeah.
I think there's really two major paths to use it that I've observed, right? You have the IDE you can use, its own dedicated development environment. Then you also have the CLI utility for Kiro.
Yeah.
How often do you typically use one over the other? When do you want to use one over the other? What
Yeah.
strategies have you?
Honestly, this really comes down to the type of developer you are. And like we used to see a lot of people trying to use one tool for one specific experience, but that's not really necessary. I use the IDE mostly because I really like clicking between files to look at what I'm doing alongside where I'm working. And in the CLI, if you just got one terminal window open, that becomes very annoying very quickly. So I just really prefer being able to click between a bunch of different files just because that's what a lot of the work I'm doing is. But some people really like just having one single pane of, it's like the pane of glass thing that everyone liked with dashboards, or everyone tolerated with dashboards. I wouldn't say anyone liked it, but just being able to have one view of things is really clear. There are developers I know that never touch the IDE and they're all in on the CLI. I think it's just like a personal preference thing, working how they want to work.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great feature of how Kiro
Yeah.
has been designed too, right? Is you can meet developers where they're at.
Yeah.
Developers can be very, very possessive of their own tools, right? Like if you
Yeah.
have VS Code, if you have JetBrains, your own IDE, like good luck convincing a developer to change.
Hmm.
Once they've found something they like to stick to it.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the Kiro CLI just makes so much sense because you can open it in your IDE of choosing and you
For
can
sure.
get advantage of all the great features of Kiro.
Yeah. And I think a bunch of it as well is just because I filmed so many demos. Like a demo on a CLI tool will never look as like easy to follow as an IDE just because you can't give all the context on screen or you're trying to like weirdly scroll past spaces. I think if I was making fewer demos, like if I wasn't a developer advocate, maybe that would change. But for what I do, I just really like being able to see everything where I need it.
Makes sense. There's so much that we can do with AI tooling today. Is there anything that stands out to you as kind of the next frontier or something it can't do yet that you see on the horizon?
That's a good question. I think the AI tooling I still want almost all revolves around my email inbox. Also like booking travel, those are still the things that are sort of like the untouched wilderness of travel optimization. But I think for now, the biggest missing pieces are all around like MCPs that I wish existed and didn't. So it's just a way of like, does it have the tooling to actually interact in the way you want? MCPs that don't exist, or skills that I need to write in order to make sure it thinks like me, or powers that are going to include the skill part and the MCP to really do things effectively. Like if you think there's still so many people who have never used any sort of LLM. And then think about all of these businesses that do not have any way for agents to interact with their websites. Like there's so many and there's so many missing pieces here, almost all on the integration side, which rings true as an AWS developer because like obviously we do a lot of things at AWS, but lots of them come back to integrations between things. And I think that sort of like intrinsic middle layer is still a little bit the Wild West. Obviously we have MCP, which is like a great protocol. It's open source. Thank you, Anthropic. Everyone builds on it, but that's not ready for everyone yet. You know, like we're not quite there 100%. So even looking at what really are those like missing pieces across your development workflow, what needs an MCP, what doesn't have one yet, and what would that look like in the future?
And how heavy would you say is the lift right now to create a new MCP server for one that doesn't exist yet?
Once again, it depends, right? Because it like depends on where the data is coming from, what that actually looks like. If you're trying to build an MCP for a real tree in real life, obviously that's not going to help you that
Yep.
much. But it's also something that I worked in professional services before I came to work at AWS, and people would want to do like funky stuff with AI, but then they would still be running SQL Server 2000 under a staircase somewhere. I would call this staircase Sam because I knew there was always one at a customer and I would be like trying to find it because everyone would act like staircase Sam didn't exist. But I was like, no, we are going to find it. I know they exist. And so I think it's still, this comes back to like the modernization plate, right? Like there's still so many people that haven't fully migrated to the cloud, even if they can build something cool with AI, or if they want an MCP to connect to something, like are they actually ready to be able to present their data and their tooling in that way? In a lot of cases, not really, but this comes back to that integration piece again, right? And I think the modernization and the integration parts, like the frontier you're seeing moving at the speed of light, but there's a lot of room in this sort of like catching up area. And that's where it's really starting to like, the pack is splitting.
The merging of old and new technology is interesting because, again, I've worked with many a customer who,
Mhm.
deep in their data center, they may have a half open laptop with a sticky note on it that says
Yes.
"Not shut, will break
Or
production."
it's probably not in a data center. In a lot of cases, it's like under someone's desk that's been running for so long, they don't realize until they go on vacation or like,
When I say data center broom closet's probably a bit more fitting.
yeah, it's a state of mind. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But no, I think it's a very good point that even though we have customers who likely have a lot of, let's say, legacy tech that they're working to tackle and modernize,
Yeah.
they can still get a lot of value out of AI.
Mhm.
And I think that's a good question too, is like, what are some approaches that you've seen to close that gap that have been effective?
I think if people have no experience with working with AI systems, they try to just go for a one shot immediately. And I think the biggest missing layer of value here is just asking the AI to ask you questions. Because they don't even know how to give enough context yet. So, okay, when I want to write a blog post, I don't say like, AI, write a blog post for me. I say, I want to write a blog post about this topic. Can you write me 10 questions that will help me get my ideas out, rage bait me into saying something controversial, find out my hot takes, like help me to guide me to get a good idea. And then so I'll go and answer all of the 10 questions. Honestly, sometimes I just do it as a voice note on my phone and then transcribe it because I'm better at talking through these ideas sometimes. And then I've got all of my words out on paper. And then I almost always have a blog post in there somewhere. Like getting it to goad me into having great ideas is really useful. And also saying, so if you're trying to build something, ask me 10 questions that will help make sure I'm going to get to the right result here. Really useful. And that's also going to help you if you're not used to giving these systems enough context to make the decision that you're going to be happy with. This is a really good way of like getting to the crux of what you want it to do and what you're thinking about it, what it has to integrate with, or like what those touch points look like. So get it to ask you questions and then answer them as yourself. And then you're going to get so much further along the way without that much extra effort on your part.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of users don't know what they don't know, right? So especially if you're
Yeah.
working with a tech stack that maybe you don't have a ton of experience in,
Yeah.
an LLM, whether that's through Kiro, Claude Code, et cetera, it'll be able to identify what it needs to know, what doesn't exist in that initial prompt to help get it to a closer solution in line with what you'd expect or want.
Yeah.
So I really do like that recommendation of asking it to ask you clarifying questions along the way.
Yeah, especially if you've got an app, right, and you want to add a feature to it, but you're not sure what you might want to ask or like add to the app, getting it to ask you questions, fantastic. Because it's going to help you to get good ideas about like conversations you had 3 weeks ago that you thought, oh, that was cool. All of these like, oh, this would be cool if I could add it ideas. You can then find a way to plan them into what you're doing. I think just, yeah, getting it to goad you into having a great idea is incredibly valuable. And I think people really sleep on that.
Yeah. And Kiro is really helpful with the concept of steering, right? So
Mhm.
if you have your own, let's say, internal libraries, APIs that you've built as an
Yeah.
organization, you can basically use steering to help guide Kiro towards sticking to your own
Yeah.
kind of coding style, right?
Yeah, for sure. My favorite example of this, we have an internal system at the company that's where we keep all, it's sort of like a knowledge base wiki thing, and it's not quite HTML. So it's like sort of HTML, but weird in these like strange ways. And the problem is the people who have the time or like sort of the need to update these pages don't know how to code, but you need to code to make them. So I've made a bunch of steering files that specifically show you this flavor of HTML, which if you just ask Kiro to make the page for you, it doesn't know all of the nuances of how these pages work. There's like different elements in there and stuff. So I made a steering file specifically for making these pages, and it's so good and so fast. And now like one of the biggest problems in any big company is people have loads of knowledge, but they don't ever update the systems because it's too annoying or too hard. Being able to have like a really nice on-ramp to automate those things so people can get the answer when they ask AI in the future. We've got it at least stored somewhere that's getting indexed. That's been really helpful, and it's being used by a bunch of people, actually. It's kind of nice. But I just, before this, was not updating any wiki pages myself. Now I have so many, and it's really helped me to be able to like communicate what I'm doing. Anytime I make a new tool, I can then make a really nice discoverable internally page about it. Um, and that's been really nice. I would never have otherwise bothered to do this. I sort of would like, I learned HTML for making MySpace profiles, which does date me, but that's not like, I'm a data scientist. I'm not a front end engineer. So I have like MySpace level HTML, which was enough for wiki pages, but it was enough that it was just annoyed me and I didn't want to do it. But now I can really move so much faster and I know what to ask for. And I'm getting really good results immediately because I've already given it all the context that I need to.
Absolutely. And I think MySpace is still the frontier of HTML technology.
I
I'd
think
say.
MySpace is the best developer onboarding experience that I've ever seen. Like, there's so many people of my generation, once again, dating myself, that learnt to code from MySpace. And I always wonder what that would look like now. Like, there's so many people who like just wanted a custom cursor on their page, and that's what got them started. And we haven't really got something like that currently. Like, we have people building like AI systems and with people tinkering, building things with any of these AI agents, but they're already tech people. The thing with MySpace is it was going out to everyone, and there were people just like figuring stuff out. I wish we had something like that now. Hopefully someone will build something, but I think it was such a great like engagement and onboarding vehicle that it didn't mean to be at all. It was just accidentally there.
I think some of the most valuable learning experiences with tech at a young age are completely accidental. You don't
Oh, 100%.
set out to learn HTML. You want to set up a MySpace page.
Yeah.
For me too, like I think kind of a common inflection point for folks, my age is like, hey, I want to set up a multiplayer Minecraft server. Right?
100%.
Accidentally taught myself how to port forward and set up, basically the on-prem version of a security group
Yeah.
at like age 12.
No, I know someone who before they were 10, they were annoyed that all the characters in their video game they were playing on their computer were men. So they learned to code so they could dig in and make them women. Like, love that. There's just like so many weird little things that you could just tinker in and dig into. So I'm excited to see what that looks like now. We see so many kids building stuff that they really wanted. So I'm excited to see our next 7-year-old startup unicorn founder entrepreneur. Yeah.
It's going to be fantastic.
I'm
Everyone gets free Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you highlight too, like AI is such a valuable learning tool. Like I'm studying for AWS DevOps Pro certification right now. And what I found is LLMs are fantastic at helping, you don't want it to just answer the question for you.
Right.
You're doing a practice exam, but it's excellent at explaining why you got a question wrong.
Yeah.
Nuances that aren't really included in the study guides that you have.
100%. And knowing like why the wrong answers are wrong and why the right answer is right. Like I make study guides for people internally when they're trying to get their cloud practitioner. And this is what most of the study guide is, like just going through those trade-off things, right? Because that's what it is to coach someone to be an architect. You're coaching them through those trade-off decisions. So getting through to that and then being able to ask follow-up questions to the agent, like what's the go? Why is EKS different to ECS? What does this mean? That stuff's super helpful. Also being able to just like, if you have a GitHub repo that you want to work through, previously what you would do is sort of like you would see a GitHub repo on like Twitter or something, think, oh, this is cool. And you'll start clicking around, but you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what's important. Being able to use Kiro to say like, take me on a guided tour of this repo, show me what's important. I'm a beginner. Show me what's important. Okay, great. Now make me a workbook for this. Take me through in a way that I'm going to learn things in the right order so I can build on my ideas. Give me little activities to do along the way. Help me to work this out is going to be so helpful. And then you can then say like, there's really good GitHub repos of Taylor Swift lyrics specifically. If you're making one of these guides for a Swiftie, you can just add this in. This is a great use of the multi-root workspace. You can add this in as a second workspace in there and then saying like, okay, now explain like EC2 guides through me for different eras of Taylor's albums. Possible and extremely funny. But yeah, I think using AI to have fun with these study guides is really just entertaining. And it's something that's going to make it so much more memorable. Because I think people get in this mindset when they're studying for a cert, they're just trying to like shove the information into their brain. But lots of AWS service names just sound the same. It's really confusing to learn. So anything you can do to make it more personal. And now you can really just go buck wild with this because there's so much. You can fact check things so easily with the MCP that then you can layer on these really nice like mnemonics or stories or things that are going to help you really remember why things are the way they are. So when you're unpacking those factual things, you can then make it a more memorable learning experience as well.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned how these tools can integrate with your existing CI/CD tooling, tools like GitHub, right?
Yeah.
Like with Kiro, what does that integration with external tooling look like today?
I think it's in the same way that an IDE integrates. I think it's also about going back to the comms piece. People are writing better READMEs than they ever have before. They're writing better testing, especially if they're when you use spec-driven development with Kiro, it also helps you to do property-based testing. So instead of testing like the 5-unit tests you might think of, it will go through for all the requirements. It will then see what are the properties of these in very formal language. And then for all of those, it'll generate like 100 test cases to be able to test those properties that are then cross-referenced across the 3 docs you make when you do spec-driven development. So outside of the fact that you're writing a better README, the code you're giving has been tested more. You've got more of an idea about how it works with edge cases. This is the whole thing with the way that property testing works is it really helps you to distill what those bugs are and how they can be fixed more completely. So the quality of code you're handing over is better and it's better documented. So in addition to all of the other CI/CD tools that you might have for whatever that workflow looks like for you, I think the human and sort of like soft skills side of how you're actually handing that stuff over is something that you can have a lot of control over the way you refine it to make sure it sounds like you, to make sure it feels like you, and to make sure the person you're handing it over for really gets what they need out of it.
I think we're in a world now where we've never seen better documentation coverage, test coverage.
I'm still not reading it, but yeah, we do have better docs.
Exactly, right? Well, one day we'll be able to read it at
I
some
mean,
point.
yeah, no, this is the thing. It's also like, I don't know, at least I know that I'm someone that I don't read the instructions before I try to build furniture either. It's probably like a condition, but being able to know it is there when I need it and then getting that clear information when I need it or asking follow-up questions, using that as a source of truth, super helpful. Like at least I know this to be true about myself so I can sort of hedge around it.
Yeah, it really is the documentation equivalent of sitting there with half of a furniture assembly manual open and one last screw that you don't know where it's put.
Yeah, and then you just give up and sort of tape it to the bottom in case you need it in future. That's not good. Do as I say, not as I do.
Your emotional support fastener, right?
Yeah,
You know, everyone needs one.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I think with regards to Kiro too, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or cover that we haven't talked about so far? Any use cases you worked on, projects you've been a part of?
The biggest thing I will say for Kiro is the hidden gem on the website is the changelog. The team goes through. This is how I, as an employee, find out what's new with Kiro. Every new release across the IDE, the CLI, any of the agents, you'll be able to see on the changelog, and they have really quick demos, really succinct points about what's new and what's updated. There's also an RSS feed for this. It's great. So if you really want to keep in touch with what's new with Kiro, because there are so many releases all the time, really just go on the changelog page and it's super up to date. And so it'll give you like really quick demos of everything that's happening, which I really like. Just staying up to speed because with any of these tools, they're moving so quickly. And if you're not keeping up to date with everything new that's available to you, you might not be getting the most out of those tools. So it's just a great way of making sure you're getting the most from it.
And it's always good to stay informed. Like you mentioned, things are changing by the week.
Well, what if there's something that's been annoying you and then there's like, oh, this is a great feature that now would solve that, or something that you didn't realize would be a problem for the rest of your team? Like that stuff's really hard. So being able to then just like keep in touch with stuff that will help you, but the rest of your team as well, really helpful just to see them in practice, really quick demos, and then you can get some key points to move forward.
So I'd love for you to walk me through a day in the life, right? Where's Kiro showing up in your workflow today?
Yeah, so I use Kira in weird ways. I mean, shocking to no one, but if I have a bunch of different blog posts to read and I want to know what order to read them, I'll shove them all into Kira, and then you can use the slash context gatherer to look at your whole workspace. I then have a bunch of other skills that I have that shape it around if I'm going to make content about these, what pieces I might find interesting, or if I'm trying to find common threads, I can do that across these. I have a bunch of like internal tools that help it to attack tasks in the way that I would want it to. So even being able to shove in a bunch of blog posts and then saying like what order to read them in, which ones are going to be most important is lovely, even though that has nothing to do with development. I also use the AWS MCP a lot. So the AWS MCP gives you all of the latest AWS docs on every single service. You can go through the what's new posts, everything to do with that. You can obviously use this for real development. I used this recently because I needed to find the birthday of every AWS service because it turns out that didn't exist as a blog post anywhere. I made like a video about the history of AWS and S3 for S3's 20th birthday, and going to manually find the like what's new post for every general availability launch date for 250 services would have meant like I just never made the blog post because it's too much work to go and dig through and find these links. But the MCP found them all, put it in the CSV for me, which was really nice so I could write the blog. I then used that also to find what start sign each of the AWS services was. Obviously not production code, but there's like very wacky ways you can use these tools, but it's still saving me so much time. But then if you want to go through and use the CDK to know the correct way to do something, even if it's just been updated, you can then just like find all that information without having to go and search for the docs, find where it is on the page, find the contextual pieces. It's so much faster just to have that single pane where you can ask it questions. So yeah, that's lots of what I do. Lots of what I do is just being nosy. I think that's a job of a developer advocate is just being really nosy. I've made a career of it. I'm figuring out what's new. And this is why I also really like the AWS MCP because it helps me to go between a bunch of different services without having to get sidetracked in 20 different tabs. Like I can really just ask the questions that I need. So then when I'm trying to find a really weird and niche answer, it's so much faster for me to find. Outside of this, I also make a bunch of projects because that's what I use in my demos as well. Last week, it's kind of a side note, I won an award and we have like an internal reward system at AWS where we can send coworkers like points in the system and you can redeem them for gift cards. And they gave me a stack of like physical QR codes to give as like real life cards, which is great. But like my coworkers don't live in New York, so I would have needed to send it anyway, but I don't have the company systems on my phone. So I couldn't like do anything with the link if I scanned it with my phone. But I one-shotted an app with Kiro last week to then like use my webcam so I could just like hold up the cards in front of my computer and it would make a nice table of all of the links. And then I could mail merge that with a nice message for all the people I wanted to send it to be able to send them in Slack so I could send it. Like, this is an example of an app that before this, I would have just maybe like scanned the QR codes and sent them to myself in Slack because it's not actually worth my time to manually build this app. Like, sure, I could. Sure. Like, I know enough about computer vision to do this, but like, why would I waste time building something to scan QR codes for rewards? That's like ridiculous waste of time. But with AI, I could one-shot it with Kiro, which was great. And it was just super fast, saved me a bunch of time. Never would have otherwise built this. So there's lots of like toy projects like that. That's sort of like, I heard on a different podcast, they compared it to playing with model trains, which I do genuinely believe. Obviously, you can do like real actual development with it as well. But the things I find most whimsical, I guess, are all of the weird model train projects. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point you bring up too, because one of the really slept on advancements that we're seeing with the development of AI tooling is I think a lot of people really want to use it to tackle their main entree workload, right? This could be like a really, really massive undertaking, but where I think there's a pretty incredible amount of value is all of the little things that people don't even think about. Like, for example, like QR code
Yeah.
aggregation or figuring out the birthday of each AWS service.
Yeah.
That's stuff that would take forever.
Or you just wouldn't do it. And you'd be like,
Yes.
oh, I wish I could do this. And you didn't. Yeah. I think there's like definitely real production, real ways to do this. And I keep talking about this as silly goose development. There is incredible value in AI tools if it helps you bring back whimsy in development and like reminds you of why you fell in love with developing in the first place. Like that first time you made a to-do app and you could add a little task to it and it just felt so exhilarating, even though now you look back and it was like this tiny thing that you just did in like a weekend or like a boot camp or something. Getting back to the whimsy of it all is really lovely. And that's what I'm seeing across everything because that's still going to help you in your real job. Big air quotes about that. But like anything that helps remind you of why you really love development in the first place is a legitimate use of time. Obviously, as well, you can use this for real enterprise workloads, and we are seeing that across the community. But don't forget to have fun too. And I think that's the other piece, like you were asking earlier about like how much has changed in the last year. I think the you can just do things mindset really is nice to see across the community. And we're seeing so many people build just like wacky and fun projects that they're excited to share and post about in a way that they wouldn't have been building in public before.
What a great mindset. I like that mantra. Bring back the whimsy.
Yeah,
I love
silly goose development. I think it's important. And I think like I talk about this at keynotes across the country. And at the start, you can see everyone's like a little bit weird about it. But then they'll message me afterwards saying something really weird they built with their kids or like something strange that they built just to have fun with it. And they're so refreshed just to have this moment of like not doing something for a business KPI for once and just like getting back into tinkering, which is really lovely. Like I think obviously these tools are built for real production workloads, but the joy of tinkering is so core to what it is to be a developer. So it's been really nice to see people get back into that.
What are some of the use cases that you've been tinkering with lately?
The best one, yeah, is that like QR code thing I had. I also want to make like Um, so I did my blog post about which star sign all the AWS services were, and I want to make like a weird, you can do lots of things with like different star sign alignments and different charts and things, and I'm trying to like plot this and do sort of like birth charts with the AWS services. No one asked for this, but I think it's funny. Like finding out Bedrock is a Libra makes so much sense, and it's just, I don't know, fun and whimsy. Why not? But yeah.
You can start to figure out which AWS services would make the most compatible couples.
No, but genuinely, there's a whole section of the blog about this. And like, because it's stuff like this that if you're studying for a cert, this isn't what you should be studying as your study notes. But if something like this helps you remember something important, legitimately useful. Because especially like with your early AWS certifications, like cloud practitioner, 80% of that exam is learning names for things and learning like relationships between the services. So if there's any tricks, any that will help you, it's still legitimate.
I'm studying for certs right now, and I swear if I go to my next cert exam and I see, hey, which star sign is RDS, I'm going to blame you.
Yeah, no, you're so welcome. Yeah.
Still, I love it. That's hilarious. And one use case that comes to mind for me too. I recently used Kiro to build, for context,
Hmm.
a bourbon tracking app.
Good.
So me and my dad are kind of, we're not huge whiskey aficionados, but we've started to get onto the fancy stuff that
Yeah.
can be a little harder to find where I'm from. So I actually used Kiro to one-shot an application that created a very, I'd say, a pretty well-developed front end that allows you to track, recent sightings of hard-to-find bourbon across the county, different states.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a good Nova Act integration there as well. Because it's really good if you're doing any of this like browser automation stuff to go and find things. I recommend. For a different project, I bought a barcode scanner to scan every book in my home because there's like hundreds of them. It was wonderful. If you have a barcode scanner, you can just start scanning other stuff you see, which would be kind of funny. To then use that to populate, so you're not typing in things from the labels. That could be fun.
That's awesome. What were you scanning the books for?
I wanted to get a data set to use in demos because it's really weird. Like, this is a thing when you are a developer making demos, there's demos that you really would want to make, but you have no way of actually showing it because you can't show any of the data sets. And then also there's obviously rules about like which data sets you can show and like proprietary of it. So like sometimes it's just easier to make them yourself. And I had 300 or 400 books at my house, so that seemed like a nice setup of a data set that I can then use for a bunch of other things. And books are really nice because they have ISBN numbers already, and you can go and use different APIs to like fetch different facts about the book. So it's like really I was just making a data set, which is a uniquely DevRel problem. But it was fun and I got to use a barcode scanner. I loved it.
Nice. It's a fun tax write-off.
Well, I didn't even do that. It's just fun. But like if you have a bunch of books, they're just sitting there. If you haven't already put them into Goodreads or whatever else you're using to track them, it's just nice to be able to tackle it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite feature that's been rolled out with Kiro recently that's made your life easier?
My favorite thing is skills and powers. It's so nice to be able to, before this, like when we were still in the prompt engineering lifestyle, I had Apple Notes and I had all of my favorite prompts saved there of like repeatable tasks that I have to do all the time, which I knew it like felt filthy to be doing it because I knew it was not good practice. But then I now have converted all of those into skills and it's really helpful. Just like it now has all the context, but without cramming up my context window because they're there when I need them, but it's not injecting them into every single time. So I'm not wasting a bunch of tokens on nothing. The other thing that I will say is there are so many different models within Kiro. When Kiro first launched, there was not that many choices, but now there's a bunch. So I really recommend, even if you have been using Kiro for a while and you've been stuck using the same model, get out there and try some different models. And you'll be able to just get a feel for different things. Maybe there's something that's really working for the type of workloads that you're doing or something that you want to recommend to the rest of your team. So just like be nosy and dig around in there.
So, Brooke, do you have any advice for folks who are looking to get started with Kiro but might not know where to begin?
I think they should get started first and foremost. And then Kiro.dev is the website. Kiro.dev/docs will give you all of the docs, including installation, but they really are very easy. If you just go to the homepage and download Kiro, you're pretty fine. From then, if you go through the docs, you can go through, there's some things for authenticating on your first project, but it's very easy. I just had to set up this computer again a day ago, and it was a very, very easy onboarding process. So you're going to be fine. I believe in you. And then you'll be able to get started with your first project, which there are even docs to help you guide through your first project. That's a great place to start. There's also one of my colleagues even made a game with Kiro, and there's a GitHub repo for this, and they teach you all about Kiro through this game that you can add features to. That's also in the docs at the very bottom of the sort of side menu. You'll be able to learn through the game, which is nice to have a project to get started with. But yeah, my biggest tip for starting is to just start.
Well, Brooke, thank you so much for joining me on Humans in the Loop. It was fantastic to have you on again. Really do appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Maybe I'll see you next year.
Absolutely. Here's hoping. So thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you very much.